that we all have people issues?
That
Is
we're
that what you're
flatterers.
That you're flatterers, yes.
saying?
And I just realized I was not recording that initial part.
Mm.
Anyway,
Oh no.
it's fine. It's fine. This is just an introduction.
Yeah.
But that's the thing of it. Like, I would argue that every single person who is here and is doing this, listening to this message right now, has this issue. Whether we recognize it or not, whether we care to recognize it or not, it's the truth. And I can easily say it between this group right now, just by having watched, having observed, and having seen our reactions to people. And seen the way that we perform in different ways relating to them. So, to get into this a little bit, we'll start with the parent issues. Because at the end of the day, I think that this ends up being the most common from what I've seen, and also just in what I've felt in this, is that the need to perform to warrant the love of our parents, or to earn the love of our parents, is something that's a very real place for us. And see, it can come in so many different ways, whether you feel like your parents don't want you, so you have to try to fight to earn their love. That's a thing. And see, just to like draw us back a little bit to see where this parallels to what Paul was talking about in Galatians 1:10 and 11, is this very real place that where it pertains to him and earning the praise of people, we're looking at that verse because this is what these people were claiming he did. They were claiming that he was trying to earn the praise of people, that he was going around sharing the messages that he was giving in order to get their love and their appreciation. This was not the case. The gospel was something that was given to him by God. Jesus met him on the road. God spoke to him personally over the course of the time when he went down to the Arabia. Thank you. Arabia. I kept wanting to say Saudi Arabia. That's not quite right. Anyway, but in that time when he was in Arabia, God spoke to him, God taught him, God personally provided him knowledge of the gospel and who Jesus is. It didn't come from anything else. But we do run this gambit and this risk of falling into these places because we can easily find information. That same stuff that Paul got, he didn't have a Bible to look at, okay? He knew the scriptures as a Pharisee. But the stuff that he came out preaching, a lot of it was received from the Spirit. Whereas nowadays, it's really easy for us. We grab the Bible, we read the Bible. That's usually sufficient for us. And it can, the unfortunate side of it is that can mask the truth. Because we can oftentimes even twist the words in the Bible. We can twist the gospel in order to give over to people whatever they need to hear in order for them to satisfy our pleasure sensors. So basically just a quick little thing is just aside relative to this, is we fall into this trap. Huh?
You're boring the dog. Just kidding.
It's fine.
I'm kidding.
One of the things that we run into all the time is people telling us that we do a good job and see where we receive a good job, that nod from. And oftentimes the way that it works out for us is that we need that dopamine rush that comes from somebody giving us a pat on the back. And see, when you've been hurt, when you've suffered at the hands of other people, you will look for that from other people. So when we preach these messages and share these words, it comes down to ways we're trying to give them something that's not only going to help them, but it's going to let them turn around and tell us that we did good, or to show us that we did good, or they're going to change in some way which makes us feel good, and we're going to receive the honor of that. And that's a dangerous place because that can cause us to water down the gospel. God can give something as somebody that's been active in the prophetic for close to a decade. I can promise you that there have been times where I have watered down words in order to not hurt people's feelings. And that was not what I was called to do. There've also been plenty of times where I've had to where it's been terrifying because I've had to run the gambit of losing a relationship or a friendship because I had a word that was difficult and I had to go share it. I shared it, and the funny thing that I had to learn about God was that in trying to manipulate and control what he gave me, I missed out. Because when I did give those words, the results were far and away better than anything that I could have made happen. But to kind of draw back to this point, starting with parents, and starting with the issue of parents and what that can represent. See, the thing of it is that when we come from broken families, we can have a lot of different issues. And it's not necessarily even that our parents hate us. Sometimes that's true. We feel like our parents don't like us and don't want us around. We can be left to feel like we have to make them happy. We have to perform for them in order to earn or gain the admiration that we feel like they should just be giving to us because we're their kids. And there's a validity to that, because there is a place where we're their children. We should be loved by them. We look to these people as being the examples of who are going to take care of us. And we draw so much of our existence from them. Our image, our mentality, our perspectives. We learn these things, we're taught these things through them. But see, the problem is that so many parents can come from broken places, either because they themselves are struggling with their own issues, or because they just don't know what it is to be a parent, or because they themselves are carrying the damage of their past. And now they've gone through this cycle, what are referred to in the Bible as generational curses, where these things carry from one to the next and down the line. And there's a place where they do this themselves. Some parents have abusive parents. My mom had abusive parents. And her parents had parents that didn't care. One of the things that God has personally been talking to me about, as an example, is even the idea of just telling my family that I love them. Because that's not something that we grew up with. Even just celebrating people for doing good things. Telling somebody that you did good, because that's not something that we grew up with. My mom never did that. Her mom never did that for her. And my grandmother's mom never did that for her. We did not have this kind of celebration of family. You're always expected to just do good things. That's the expectation. However, if you screw up, you will be criticized. You will hear about that. If you make the most fantastic piece of art, you might get a good job, maybe. But the truth is, you probably won't. However, if you throw down and punch your little brother in the face, you'll hear about that. So you'll know what not to do. But there's no reward, there's nothing positive about doing anything good. And that just sits you in a place where, growing up, for so many of us, our existence was this. That you live in a circumstance where there are bad things, but there's no reward for doing good things. You'll be punished for the bad and receive nothing for the good. Could you imagine what that would be like, to sit in a place, and what that inspires as you grow up as a child? It sits you in a circumstance that's hopeless. So you have to try to find reasons to hope every day. There's no reason to do anything good. You have to find and make up your own reasons to do anything good. It's just a neutral area. It's void of anything. So there's a place where we had to go out and try to earn love. To feel like we had to perform in order to warrant this. We had to be funny. We'd be smart, artistic, whatever we could be in order to gain love from other people, for people that care about us. It's a real thing that happens, and happens frequently with different families in different ways. And then when we get into talks about abusive parents, parents who willfully harm their children emotionally or physically, in order for what? To assert the need to conform to certain rules. The idea that they're going to hurt their children in terrible ways in order to make them good. That's not how that works. There are betrayals that happen. The kids walk away feeling betrayed. They feel hated. They feel at odds with their parents. They feel like they have to fight them at every turn. They have to cower. They have to hide in order to just survive the next day. Because the great fear is that their parents are going to hurt them again. That's a terrible way to live. That's a terrible way to have to exist.
Some kids even have to learn to manipulate adults just to
Exactly.
survive.
Everything is about survival. And that is not what God called us to. That is not what God called us to when he created the entire idea of being parents. And that's in no way what he represents. But because of this place, we'll project that image onto him. So everything that we do becomes about trying to make him happy so that he won't kill us. And do you know how easy it is to fall into that kind of mindset that what God wants to do is send you to hell? How many children have grown up in these homes and then come to Christianity, and now they stand out on a street corner with a bullhorn preaching hellfire and brimstone because they believe that their version of love is to help other people survive God.
They think God's some sadistic ogre.
Exactly. They fear him. Not a holy, reverent fear, but a legitimate terror generated by the concern and the delusion that God is a monster. This is something to be looked at, something to be considered. And as far as our parents are concerned, the other one to discuss that I was given here to go over were the parents that make us feel abandoned.
Neglect you, yeah.
Yes, exactly. There are some parents, going over the different types of parents here that we're looking at. I've only got the 3 that I was given to talk about. But the neglectful ones are another side of it. And sometimes they do all of these, okay? Just so we're clear. That it's not like there's one or the other. Sometimes it's all the above. There are even other ones to talk about. But I'm not given to talk about those. The parents that leave us to feel neglected sit us in a place where we have to believe, again, it goes back to that point of hopelessness, but the idea that we need to try to find their love. Because one of the really hard things about this is that, again, we go back to that place where we should feel loved by our parents, ideally. And yet, the neglectful parents are the ones that leave us in a place where we have to try to find love. Most of the women and men that I've known who are very prone to, promiscuity or overly sexually active come from these kinds of homes. Because they need to go and do whatever they can to feel loved, to feel accepted. A lot of the homosexual friends that I have, same story. It's that desperate need to feel accepted, and it's that desperate need to feel something that they have never received from their parents. So they're left to sit in situations where they have to try to find that. So they run into these societies or these groups or whatever that make them feel accepted or wanted or loved. Even just to feel it, even for a moment. And they will fight and strive for that. They'll give up everything for that. But see, it creates this kind of mindset that when they hear about God and about his love for them, it sits them in a place where all that they can feel is that same neglect, that same abandonment. God at this point in time becomes somebody who doesn't care about them. He's a father. Fathers don't care about their children. Ergo, God does not care about us. That's even where you get really twisted doctrines and ideas that God doesn't, it's not about God being with you, it's about what you can do for him. This is not scriptural in any way, shape, or form. The entire idea of serving God comes out of a place of already being with him. God has prepared you to do great works, but he does so after already preparing your heart.
Yeah, some people's reductionistic view of God is that they're just his sacrificial lamb.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So in these places, they'll sacrifice themselves, but more than anything, they'll try to perform in order to try to earn his love, just as they had to do with their parents, just as they had to do to reach out. To give another example of even a personal one, is like from my personal story about my mom, and one of the really difficult things with her growing up was that in many ways she left my brother and I feeling that kind of neglect. It was after we moved out here and she opened her own business. There were a lot of things that we wouldn't do, like Matt, for example, he loved sports. He wanted to play baseball, but he refused to go play on the baseball team. And I remember talking to him about it and asking him why. And his answer specifically was because he knew that Mom would never come to any of his games. And I remember agreeing to that because I felt the same way. There was no point to doing anything because she wouldn't be there.
Yeah,
We
that's the
wouldn't-
next thing.
We wouldn't have any support. We were always having to be out on our own to just find our own ways to feel loved or admired or whatever. So we had to try to find it in other places, like in our own family. Like Matt and I and Dusty and Calvin and Leah. We all kind of banded together to support each other because our parents weren't really there for us. But then it goes even further in the fact that, like, when I talk about my mom, for example, probably one of the most significant examples of feeling neglected were with the men that she chose, and how even if we had issues with them, she would still choose them, even when when their behavior became such that they were destructive to our family, to us, she would still choose them, and we were left to feel that we didn't matter. This is another example of like how we can feel neglected by our parents as they struggle with their own issues here. Because my mom, at the end of the day, she wanted to feel loved because she came out of that same kind of broken mentality which was created by her parents. So she had to try to find love. And as such, she would choose these men who made her feel something. However, they were abusive, they were cruel, they were making drugs, they were doing any number of different terrible things. But that didn't matter as long as they made her feel something akin to being loved. So, we were left to feel as though we didn't matter as she sought this out and struggled with her own truth and her own perception here. And she justified this behavior. So in these places, we were left to try to grow from this. So when it came down to it and I started hearing about Jesus, my idea of God was one that, the only way that you could really be one with him was if you made him happy, and that was the only way to make him happy was if you performed for him adequately. Everything was about what could be done, being the best, performing the most adequately, the most significantly, and having the most substantial effect on the world around you. This is a great motivation in a way, however it's sick. It's like injecting yourself with rabies for the energy boost. There's a thing here to be considered with the parents that we've had, and to look at how we've been left to feel and grow, and to understand what we've needed from them and what we have not received. Be it support, be it care, be it gentleness, be it kindness, be it love. And there's a thing to understand that our parents are not God. And as tongue-in-cheek and as simplistic as that sounds, it's something to sit with. But we'll get to the sitting with part. The other side of this, to even go further, is about lovers and the relationships that we've been through. I think that we've all, to some extent, maybe not all of us, but many of us have been through relationships where we felt many of those same things. Mm-hmm. We end up with somebody who claims that they love us back. Like, we pour ourselves out. We give of ourselves. And these other people will claim that they're there for us as well. Be it a husband, be it a girlfriend, boyfriend, even just a crush or a fling. It doesn't matter, because they still put us in a place where they make us feel accepted. They make us feel loved. They make us feel wanted. And therein lies like our significant issue here, is that as we thirst for that, as we hunger for that, just that acceptance, that need to feel something, we've ended up in places where we felt pushed away, where we felt rejected, where we felt abandoned, where we felt abused, uncared for, slighted. One thing from this week that God was talking to me about distinctly was my last relationship. And what he was shining a light on was even just my place of being a people pleaser in that relationship. In the fact that, in a lot of ways, I would give too much, because at the end of the day, I didn't believe that love was enough. I didn't believe that love was enough, or that I was enough in my love to mean anything to her. Because at the end of the day, there was a reality that ever since I was a little kid, from what I'd been raised with, I didn't believe that love was enough. So even just giving love, and not like the kind of like lustful love that a lot of people talk about, or the self-caring kind of love that a lot of people talking about, but I'm talking about the selfless kind, where it's about the other person and how much they mean to you, and how much they mean in general. The kind of thing where it is about them. Where the relationship can be, the kind where it does grow in a mutually beneficial way. But I never felt that was enough, because at the end of the day, I felt like that could mean nothing. And that relationship only served to confirm that at the end, because that's what I was told. I gave it.
Hey, Aaron. Do you know if it's okay to park in that parking lot?
What parking lot?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just close the door.
Yeah, close it up. Let's go. I'll be right back.
What?
I'll be right back. I was gonna park over here, you said.
No, you just
Oh.
park where you're at.
Yeah.
Keela, be quiet.
Sorry.
Anyway, we're already started. Alright. So, as I was saying here, about this place of like lovers and whatnot, where we felt slighted by them, and my personal story was even just that one of the things that God had been talking about in this place was that because I didn't believe in the love being enough, or that I didn't believe it was going to be good enough, I had to like overcompensate.
In the form of worship.
Exactly. It became the kind of thing where I worshipped her. I gave so much of myself with the intention of trying to just overcome that fear, that I basically just try to nuke it with my personal love. for her. And in that place it became worship, and in that place it became obsessive, and in that place it became destructive. Because at the end of the day, I was trying to gain her love, and in many ways it was a very destructive relationship for both of us, in the sense that, you know, for her, she didn't really want me. So at the end of the day, when she told me about loving me, it didn't really mean anything. It meant, basically, it was the same thing as her saying, "You did good today," or "You made me feel good today. You made me feel good right now." It didn't have the same meaning or value that it does when somebody looks at you and sees the person that you are and admires that and tells you they love you. All that it meant was that I made her feel good. And it put me in a place where, in order to get that positive, shut up, Keela, that positive affirmation, I would have to perform more and more. I'd have to give more words, share more things, more insights about how much she mattered to me, to the point where it became repetitive. It became draining, exhaustive. At the end of the day, there are parts of me later where I almost felt thankful that it was over. But then at the same time, there was that side that just thirsted so much for that relationship, that wept for it, mourned for it, begged for it, to be back. Because in many ways it was like an addiction. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands or anything like that for who has had a similar experience with a relationship, but I know that there are others in the room who have, and even outside of the room, because it's a real thing that happens so often. And when we face that kind of rejection in our pasts, it can certainly affect our ability to appreciate the reality of what we're in. See, the thing of it is that in a loving relationship, where it is mutual love and care and admiration, there isn't a place for selfishness in the sense of demanding that one build the other up while they give nothing in return. There is a place about it being a mutually constructive thing. And what God seeks, and more than that, something intimate and deep and true in that same place. And that ends up being what God models for us. When it's discussed in relating to marriage, there's a place for intimacy, not guardedness. There's a place for honesty, not platitudes. There's a place for truth, not lies. Even the white kind that seem to be nice, or seem to be constructive in their own sense until they get found out as not being true, at which point they just become destructive. The thing of it is that in this place, what God tries to illustrate for us is this thing, this deep, intimate, loving relationship that He has constructed for us and intended for us to be able to really grow in and live in. But it can't exist in places where we're maintaining these old mentalities, or where we're maintaining our hurts. Mm-hmm. And see, if our hurts are dictating what a relationship looks like to us, or what the opposite sex looks like to us, because it can go that far, where it stops being that you even... I've known a few men that have turned to homosexuality after they were hurt by women, and they begin to hate women. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they won't admit it, but they'll treat them with such disdain, with such disgust. They won't see it, but it will be true. And this is kind of the thing, this is a phenomenon that I've run into so many different times. And even now there are a lot of women who hate men, and there are a lot of men who hate women. and they'll use each other for sex, but they'll still go back to that same idea of this is what the opposite sex looks like, those same stereotypes and stigmas, and they'll carry those and as justifications. And it destroys every possible idea of what this relationship could be and is supposed to be.
I think that's why like S&M is becoming so popular, because it's like they're actually like, they like the idea of brawling with each other, but they just sort of bond over the sexual elements of it for a while.
Maybe.
There's a few other reasons, but
Yeah. I won't go too far with that one. That's a rabbit trail and a half.
Yeah.
But yes. So there's this place to even just recognize like where we've been hurt by other people in these kinds of romantic relationships, where we sought love and found degradation, where we sought admiration and found only spite, only carelessness, where we've sought to be nurtured only to be abandoned, where we've sought intimacy and found only betrayal. And then the last thing to talk about is friendship. The truth of the matter is that in each of these relationships, certain things do carry over in the forms of acceptance. And friendship is probably the most acceptance-dedicated one of these things, where it is about coming to people who can know you for who you are, and appreciate you, care for you, love you in the place. The intimacy level is never quite the same as the romantic. That's never quite as caring as the parents. But there is a lot of that comes into it. There's a place where we, as friends, you can see each other and be there for each other in so many different ways. You can care for each other and mean something to each other. There's a very, very strong bond that's intended to be there. And again, it can come back to these places of being mutually constructive. At least it's supposed to be. Where we find so many different ideals like loyalty, kindness, generosity, where your friends take care of you. But see, the problem is that for so many of us, what ends up happening is sometimes in order to find that acceptance, we'll compromise ourselves and our own character. Sometimes we end up playing a role, even, where we will let ourselves be degraded to just being a caricature.
Or a pet.
Or a pet. That's true. But a caricature of who we really are.
ASM.
Anyway, in this place where we can find ourselves having to fulfill a role, like at one of my old churches, I remember, I ended up having to be kind of like a de facto leader in a sense. Not because I wanted to be, but because I knew that was necessary for the church group to continue functioning. And in that place I became sort of, I don't want to say a role model, but I became the guy in a sense of the word. So I had to be the best out of everybody. But also I had to be so many other things. I had to wear a lot of hats. And it wasn't because I wanted to be, it's not because I felt like I wanted to. It had everything to do with just being this in order to be the best for them. In order to maintain that place of not only keeping them there, but also maintaining their love and their affections for me and for this church. It became the kind of thing where I had to become that magnet to draw everybody back every week, and part of it was me performing, giving of myself in certain ways where I had to act a certain way or look a certain way. I had to be so funny and I had to be so engaging, and even if I didn't feel it, I had to put on a show for everybody in order to keep this going. Even to the point where I had to generate entire ways of communicating in order just to reach certain people. And the thing of it was that in many ways I was fake. I had to become a fake person for the benefit of them. I had to compromise myself, my integrity, and my character in order to be something for these people. And where there's a place to like support and grow, there's also a place to be appreciated for who you are. If your friends don't care about who you are, they're not really your friends, just to be very blunt.
Yep.
And I think that we've all run into places where we found that, and at the end of this relationship where I was this thing, the person who had originally been that guy came back, and they all migrated to him, and I was left feeling abandoned.
It's like the kind of friends who only like you because you have money or something.
Exactly. They only like you because you have money.
Or you
You
have a
make them laugh.
car and take them everywhere.
Yes, that's a real one.
Yep, that's how I feel sometimes, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing of it. It's like, why are we left with these places where we can't feel accepted for who we are? Why is it that we always have to fulfill a role? Why is it that we have to break down to become a certain kind of thing for the people around us? I mean, you become a service. You become nothing more than a performer, an act, a form of entertainment. That's not you being you as a person, that's you being you as an object. And see, even in that place where with what God represents to us, if He's to be our friend, it's really easy again to fall into these places of preaching that He's going to view us, He's going to objectify us. Because He's only going to care about us as long as we're doing things for Him, or we're being something for Him. We put on an act for Him. It's not about the truth of our hearts. It's not about our honest feelings or our honest perceptions. It's about what we can do and be for Him. And that's also not true. In all of these things discussed, not a single one of these things have been intended for what they have been, for the hurts that we have endured as a result. And see, as a result of this, what we've been left with is this kind of place of becoming people pleasers, where we have to seek this attention. We have to earn this love. And as we talked about last week, we already have God's attention and His love. We already have His care, His admiration. He looks at every single one of us and is blessed. If we have issues, He'll confront them. If we have sin in our lives, He'll confront them. But He will not abandon us over them. He won't reject us over them. He won't push us away and not stop caring. He'll be there to be with us through these circumstances, to be with us through these situations, and to love us. We already have His love, every bit of His love, to the point where He was willing to die for us, to suffer for us, born to suffer, born to die, living a life prepared and ready to die. For a bunch of people, there's a level of love and care there. I want each of you to just imagine the idea of being born with the knowledge that you were going to die for people who didn't care about you, or who would reject you. But you were still going to die. You were still going to, and it was going to suffer, you were going to suffer painfully in order for them to have a chance at something more than just a life of misery and hopelessness. Could you imagine the weight of that? But to do it joyfully, to even yearn for it, as Jesus did. That's not something that we do. That's not something that I think we appreciate. And that's certainly not something that we have found represented in our personal lives. There's a place for us to recognize the truth of what the gospel represents and how that does not correlate to us needing to go out and earn God's approval. God's not our parents. He's not our past lovers. He's not our past friends. He's much, much more. He's the lover of our souls. He is our Father in heaven.
I think some people get that very, sense that they have to plot in order to get God indebted to them, but it still doesn't feel right, but they feel that way, and then they become apathetic.
Sure, that happens as well.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different dynamics to this, and I think the reality of it for each of us is that we're going to get into a moment in just a bit. I'm going to end the recording in just a couple minutes. But I'm going to pose the question before I do. What is it that you need to hear? What is it that you need from people? Or what is it that you need from God? At the end of the day, what is it that you seek from God? Do you seek love? Do you seek affirmation?
I have to take this, sorry.
Do you seek to be recognized?
Do you seek anything?
Sure. If you find that you have nothing, that says a lot too. But that's an answer to to those questions. And then the final question is, of these things, what do you not believe you have already received from Jesus? Saying that honestly. And I think even for the people that end up just watching this, period, the recording of it, find somebody, a friend, a parent, somebody who you know and trust, and pray with them on these things. Because there are places for you to be spoken into as much as it is for you to simply receive from God. It's easy to end up falling into places where we hear things from the Lord, but we can brush it off. But we'll end up having a time to just pray with each other and talk with each other about what we see in the Spirit and what God's showing us about each other. So, with that,